People that work in the wedding industry, have you ever seen a couple and immediately thought, this ends in divorce? Why? It was the third time the bride had hired me, and all the guys had been carbon copies. See, either this girl does not know what she really wants in a guy, or maybe she's the problem. Not sure if this belongs here, since I'm really sure that they got divorced after, but anyway, I was helping out at my parents' restaurant where a huge wedding party was hosted. I was busy serving drinks, and suddenly loud yelling and screaming started right behind me. Turns out the bride had somehow found out that the groom had hooked up with her sister right before the wedding ceremony, and apparently on a few occasions before, and in her anger she stabbed him in the chest with a dinner fork several times. We had to call an ambulance and the police. It was like hell. Wow, so this is all happening on the wedding party, so they're off to a flying start. Photographing the groom, and you see his eyes light up when the guest arrives. You look over and it's a cute woman in a short dress. He smiles, walks up to the woman, picks her up and swings her in his arms. The best smile I captured of the groom all day. The marriage didn't last 6 months from what I've heard. Yeah, I know this obviously sounds like the groom is a terrible person, but I feel like sometimes you just get into a situation and you think, man, I am with the wrong person, but you realize that when it's way too late, and then everything gets way more complicated. When the bride and groom argued over why the groom's mother shouldn't get all money given to them on their wedding day. Yeah, that was a red flag. Why would all the money go to the groom's mother, exactly? Did she arrange the marriage? Did she do all that to make some money? All the freaking time. You know how they say 50% of weddings end in divorce? I can pretty much predetermine who that 50% are going to be with about 98% accuracy. So I bake wedding cakes for a living. I own my own bakery, but I've also worked in a country club kitchen, doing basically the same thing, plus other pastry chef duties day of the weddings. I've seen them both for the tasting and design consultation, and on their wedding day. I see how they interact when they're just together, but also when under stress of the big day. I've seen everything. Lots of cheating, lots of drunks, lots of terrible mothers. I once had a mama's boy who ignored his wife when they were supposed to be having their cake tasting to cuddle their mother and hand feed her cake. His mother was not supposed to be there, and you could tell the bride was pissed. By the end of it, he had kissed his mother on the lips multiple times. Divorce. I've seen some woman complain at everything her fiancé said. Any suggestions he had for what he liked results in him being called stupid. Anytime she'd open her mouth, he'd cover and flinch. Their cake actually got cancelled like a month before the wedding, so we didn't get anything but the deposit, even though we'd started baking it. The first time I've lost out on money and I've been relieved. Once had this arrogant dickhead Turkish guy marrying into this Bangladeshi family. The bride was sweet, about 10 years older than him, and she came from a fairly well-off family. Generally got the impression that this being a Turk/South Asian marriage was kind of a big deal, even though they're both Muslim. But since she was 30-something, they wanted her to get married, so they allowed it. A guy complains about everything during the planning process, especially over them not serving alcohol, is generally a jerk to us, but is just straight up cruel to her. Like at one point, when we were meeting, I asked after her wedding dress, because South Asian wedding dresses are gorgeous. She's showing me this amazing dress, and he says straight up, I don't know why she picked that one. She looks fat and old in it. Every other woman is going to be more beautiful than her on her wedding day. He then showed me the dress he picked out, which isn't traditional South Asian style at all. And it's very Western and very ugly and basically makes the model in the picture look naked, so it's sheer. When she says something about how no mosque would let her in dressed like that and her traditions are important, he just sneered and said she should get over it and her traditions weren't that important. Divorce red flag. Found out later they didn't last a day. From the way the servers tell it, midway through the reception, the guy raises his hand to his new bride when she asks him a question about being drunk, and she flinched and turned away, protecting her face. He grabs her by the arm and rips her around, pissed. Her mother and aunt were standing 3 feet from her and lost their minds, realizing what must have happened there. His response when the mom started to lose her crap on him was to hit the mother. So in the middle of this very big, 600-plus person Bangladeshi wedding, this 20-something outsider jerk no one wanted her to marry anyway smacked a well-respected woman in their community. There was a brawl, the cops were called, and the marriage was annulled. Yeah, so going back to the very start of this extremely long post, it is kind of interesting when people bring up the statistic of like how 50% of marriages end. But yeah, like he was saying, it's not just some random coin flip, like, oh, like you never know, it could end in divorce or it could go well. Like, if you are a good person and your spouse is a good person and you get along well together, at that point you're already well above average, so I'd say you have a decent shot. I worked fine dining and catering for over 20 years, so I've worked lots of weddings and receptions. I once heard a bride at the reception during the toasts say that she actually thought she was asking out the groom's twin brother on their first date. And that might actually be cute, except she just kept going on. How the twin was more compatible, etc. Then she ended the toast with, Well, as nice as you are, you'll make a great first husband. I was walking past the cameraman at that time, and you could hear me on the tape saying, "Did you get that? Tell me you got that." You know, I tend to stay away from relationships where right off the bat I can already tell that it's probably just going to be a short-term thing, because I never want to go into one just expecting like, yeah, we're probably going to break up pretty soon. And if you're someone like this who does this for marriages, you're doing life wrong. At the wedding, when the I do's came, the groom said, "I guess. Do you take her as your wife? Do I have to? I mean, sure." Wedding DJ here. Had a wedding a few years ago when the groom was a total jerk. When it was his turn to make a speech, he refused to make one. When the bride's sister begged him to please make a speech, or at least just tell the bride she looked beautiful, he got up and took the mic, mumbled to her that she looks beautiful, and sat back down. When I left after the wedding was done, I was walking to my van with some gear, and I saw the bride sitting outside crying. Found out a few days later that the groom hit her 3 days before the wedding, and he tried to hit her at the wedding again when she asked him not to drink so much and pace himself. You know, I don't think that arranged marriages are all this common, at least not from people who are going to be posting on Reddit. So are these people being forced into these marriages? Like, what is going on? Not actually in the industry, but I have helped out a friend with a few weddings. 2 of the weddings I could just tell they weren't going to make it. The first wedding, the bride and groom hardly talked the entire wedding. It was like they had nothing in common. And then later, the groom pretty much screws off halfway through and went home because, I quote, "he was tired." So he just left his bride having to take pictures with the wedding guests on her own. He never came back that evening, so she had to greet everyone off. Funny enough, about a year later, I heard they're filing for divorce. Another time was actually last summer. Just before the wedding speeches, the groom went to go hang out with his friends for like half an hour, leaving the bride sitting there alone and delaying the speeches. Then right after the bride and groom cut the cake, he once again went to go hang out with his friends and abandoned his wife. So she was left alone, having to mingle with all the guests, and he made no interaction with her side of the guests. He stuck with his friends the rest of the evening. His wife basically had to go and beg him to come and take more wedding pictures. At one point in the evening, he actually went for a drive with his friends for about an hour, and his wife had no idea where he was. I mean, I get wanting to mingle with your friends at your wedding, but not to even mingle with your wife's family or friends on your wedding day seems quite rude. You know, some people are looking forward to their wedding day for months as it leads up to it, and other people just can't even make it through the day, I guess. So I have a friend who I grew up with. She was always gorgeous and incredibly popular with guys, and I always thought she was a great person. As I got older, I came to realize she was actually extremely toxic in relationships, and did better when she was single. She had been seeing a new guy for 2 months, when one day I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Knowing her history, it was a pretty massive red flag for me. I turned up to the wedding, and it's a gorgeous little backyard type wedding. It's spring and everything looks perfect. I greet her family, and it's like I've turned up to a funeral, not a wedding. They're all extremely solemn, and when I ask about the groom, her mother rolls her eyes and says, "This is a mistake." The wedding commences, and as the bride comes down the aisle, her face is gray, and like she would rather be anywhere else. They exchange vows while the bride does everything in her power to not touch her husband-to-be, even standing a solid meter away from him as they stand at the front. She actually cringes and looks away when he gets choked up, saying how much he loves her. When the priest announces the kiss, the bride takes a slow step forward and presents her cheek for him to kiss instead of her lips. No one cheers. It's just an awkward shuffling of feet and a few scattered claps. It was the worst wedding I've ever been to. They lasted about 3 months before separating. Man, I feel like the biggest mystery in this whole story is like, why were they getting married at all? Was it just that they really wanted some tax benefits, or that they really just wanted to post is married on Facebook or something? I perform ceremonies as an officiant, and know other officiants. The worst are the weddings that are just a bad idea. The couple is young, inexperienced, and selfish. I mean, even courthouse weddings can last decades, but if you have a wedding that is clearly not planned out, they are often not thought out as well. The weddings that are rebellious as a "F you daddy, I'm 19 and I can marry who I want," I give about 2 years, especially if the bride and groom are out of sync with one another, or one just looks like this was the other's idea primarily. Oddly enough, weddings with cheesy themes like Star Wars or Elvis last longer than the traditional styles. I have theories on that, but don't have enough data that's not anecdotal to back it up. But I think casual weddings where everyone is relaxed, happy, and having a good time because the wedding is about celebrating rather than ceremony will last the longest. A sense of humor helps. If both the bride and groom are relaxed and silly with one another, those last the longest. Yeah, it's kind of ironic that the people that are like so focused on having the grandest wedding and spending $100,000 on it and inviting 1,000 people, it's almost like an Instagram wedding, if that makes sense, where it's like they want to put on the show that they are getting married and they want all the attention for it, but they aren't actually doing it just because they want to be married, which is where the casual ones seem to fall. I'm not in the industry. I have a story anyway. When me and my wife were about to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary, my family let me know that they had a pool. When we got married, for how long we would last. None of them had lasted longer than a year. This year we're going to be celebrating 19 years married together. We feel that after 2020, we are having the best time together and still best friends. The pot was never claimed. Well, hey, that should mean that you should get all the money then, right? I used to drive a limo and did a few weddings. This one Saturday afternoon, I'm picking up both the bride and the groom, the best man and the maid of honor. The poor groom has his arm in a full cast and immobilized with a steel rod. Turns out he had shattered it a week earlier while riding an ATV. They all get in the car, and the bride-to-be starts ragging him hardcore, telling him he's such an idiot, he has ruined the wedding, he's such a loser. She's not letting up and not letting go. Obviously, she knew about the injury, so it wasn't a surprise. She was just using it to drop F-bombs and other unwholesome words in his general direction. I pull up to the church, and she and the maid of honor leap out and go into the church. The best man asks if he still wants to go through with the wedding, and the poor dumb schmuck says yes, with the enthusiasm of a sleepy sloth. I just wanted to say, no dude, don't spend the next 5 years with that witch. But he was getting out of the car by then. I don't know how it turned out, but I'm sure it wasn't good. So I just have to wonder, when you're leading up to what you know is going to be a horrible wedding, what's the best time to pull out of it? Is it best to do it maybe like a week before the wedding, or wait all the way until the ceremony when you just come out and say, I don't? I mean, that would make it much more of a show, so at least people wouldn't have wasted all their time and money showing up. Not necessarily a divorce between the happy couple, but while working a wedding one summer, I saw the best man and maid of honor walk out of the same bathroom like 10 seconds apart. So I've always wondered how that went over. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't really see anything wrong with that one, actually. Sure, you have the bride and the groom there together, and then their best friends are also together, so I mean, what's wrong with that? I have a friend who is a wedding photographer, a rather busy and expensive one at that, so people usually book a year in advance. So she had a bride book the wedding date and pay the deposit, nothing unusual there. The bride confirmed the venue, also booked and pricey, and had general discussions with her about the style that she wanted. They had regular meetings over the following months, but the groom was never there. A bit unusual, but not unheard of. So it's now 4 weeks before the wedding, and they have the meeting to lock down all the details, but still no groom. My friend asks about him, and the bride mentions for the first time that she isn't engaged. Okay, maybe she has a long-term boyfriend and is planning a surprise wedding. No, it turns out that she doesn't have a boyfriend or any guy in mind, but she prayed about it and God told her to trust that he will provide a groom for her. So in the end, no groom magically materialized, and there was no wedding. So in that case, the marriage lasted 0 minutes, and we were all sure that it wasn't going to work out. In fact, at that time, we had some running jokes about her meeting a guy on a date, and asking him if he wants to go to a wedding with her next weekend. Okay, well, there's one that I haven't heard before. So that's the last story, and I skipped a bunch of the stories, and I can just sum up every single one with this. It's just, the bride or the groom got way too drunk, or they cheated on somebody, or there was just fights breaking out between the families at the wedding. But yeah, I've never heard of somebody who sets up a wedding, but it doesn't actually have a person to marry yet. Man, somebody probably should have just put up like a Craigslist ad and just said like, come be the groom of this wedding, just show up at this time at this place, and you'll get married. But anyway, hopefully you had a nice week. It feels very chill to only upload 3 times a week again. Like, I was so used to last month doing it 5 times a week that now I'm just like, huh, well, now what do I do? And it's not so much that it takes so much time and energy to make a video, but I only have so many video topics lined up, and so I don't want to burn through them too fast, basically. But that's all. I guess I'll see you Monday.